single mother dressed casually for a blind date, unaware that he was a billionaire who fell in love with her at first sight. A story of authenticity and true love that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and comment on where you're watching from. The rain hammered against the windows of the General Hospital with a persistence that echoed Sarah Johnson's exhaustion. It was 4 in the morning when she finally managed to bring Emily home after a long night, watching her 8-year-old daughter struggle through another asthma attack. The cold corridors of the hospital, the smell of disinfectant, and the constant beeping of monitors still felt glued to her skin, even now, sitting in the cramped kitchen of her 2-room apartment on the east side. "Mum, are you really going out today?" Emily asked, wrapped in a blanket on the sofa that served as her bed. Her big brown eyes still carried the fatigue from the previous night, but there was a worry there that an 8-year-old shouldn't know. Sarah glanced at her phone for the 10th time that morning. 1:45 p.m. The date was set for 2 p.m. at Café Latte in downtown. Carla, her best friend since school days, had insisted so much on this blind date that Sarah had given in more to make her friend stop talking about it than out of any real hope. "Sweetheart, it's just an hour, 2 at most. Mrs. Thompson will stay here with you, and if you feel anything, any shortness of breath, she'll call me right away, okay?" Sarah stroked her daughter's curly hair, noticing how it seemed more fragile after each attack. "And you have to promise to use your inhaler if you need it. No being stubborn like your mom." Emily smiled, a small but genuine smile. "You're not stubborn, Mom. You're strong." The girl's words touched a painful spot in Sarah's chest. Strong. If only Emily knew how many times her mother cried in the shower, how much effort it took every day, every bill paid, every medication bought. But that was it. Sarah was strong because she had to be, because she had no choice. At 1:30 p.m., Sarah looked at herself in the tiny bathroom mirror and sighed. The grey sweatshirt was faded with a small hole near the left cuff, a reminder of when it snagged on the school fence last week. The white sneakers had seen better days, with a small opening on the right side that she tried to disguise by stepping in a specific way. Her brown hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, with a few rebellious strands escaping around her face. There was no time for makeup, and even if there were, what was left of her foundation had dried up months ago. "It's not a fashion show, Sarah. It's just a cafe," she murmured to her reflection, trying to ignore the deep circles under her eyes, and the pallor that came from sleepless nights and constant worries. Besides, who would want to get involved with a single mom who can barely keep it together? The journey to downtown was an adventure in itself. 2 buses, a subway, and a walk in the rain that insisted on falling. Sarah arrived at Café Latte 15 minutes late, dripping water and with her hair stuck to her face. The establishment was elegant without being pretentious. Exposed brick walls, hanging plants, the rich aroma of Brazilian coffee mingling with something she couldn't identify. Maybe cherry blossoms. There was a flowering tree outside, and its pink petals floated in through the open window. She paused at the entrance, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt. The other patrons seemed to belong there. Well-pressed clothes, styled hair, animated conversations about travel and projects. Sarah almost turned back when a male voice called her. "Sarah?" She turned to see a man rising from a table in the corner, tall, maybe 6 feet tall, with dark brown hair and a few grey strands at the temples. He wore dark jeans and a simple white shirt, nothing extravagant. What caught her attention the most were his eyes, grey-green, intense, yet with a kindness she didn't expect. "Sorry for the delay." Sarah approached the table, leaving trails of water on the floor. "My daughter had an attack during the night and I almost cancelled. In fact, I thought about cancelling about 10 times on the way here." David Smith, that was the name Carla had mentioned, along with vague information about him being a nice guy who works in consulting, was watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't pity or judgment. It was genuine interest. You don't need to apologize. Is she okay now? He pulled out a chair for Sarah to sit, a simple gesture that took her by surprise. How long had it been since someone did that for her? Yes, thank God. Asthma. You know how it is. Or maybe you don't. I don't know if you have kids. Sarah realized she was talking too fast, nervous. She took a deep breath. Sorry, I'm a bit disheveled. I didn't have much time to get ready. David smiled, and it was a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. You look perfect, just way you are. For a moment, Sarah was left speechless. Not because the phrase was particularly romantic, but because there was a sincerity there that she wasn't used to hearing. The last men she had dated always had some comment about her appearance, suggestions on how to dress better, how to fix her hair, how to be more feminine, as if she were a project to be fixed. So, consulting, Sarah said, trying to change the subject as the waiter approached. What kind? David hesitated for just a second. Business. Nothing too exciting. And you? Carla told me you're studying. Business administration. At night. I work during the day as a cleaning assistant at the Skyline building over in Midtown. Sarah waited for the expression that always came, that look of pity or embarrassment when people discovered her profession, but David simply nodded, genuinely interested. It must be tough to balance work and study with a small child. Yeah, but it's worth it. I want to give a better life to Emily. She is everything to me. Sarah's voice softened when she spoke of her daughter. Sometimes I think she's more mature than I am. Last week, when I was worried about a test, she drew a picture of us flying in a plane to Paris. She said that when I graduate, we would travel to all the places I wanted. David felt something tighten in his chest. There was a purity in that love, a dedication he rarely saw in his world of business and convenience. How old is she? 8 years old. And before you ask, yes, I was very young when I got pregnant. 19 to be exact. The father, well, let's just say he wasn't ready to be a dad. In fact, I don't think he was ever ready for anything in life. The bitterness in her voice was subtle, but David caught it. That must have been hard. It was, yeah, but I don't regret her for a second. Sarah looked out the window, watching the rain start to lessen. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing everything right, you know, if I'm giving her what she deserves. Other kids have parents, have trips, expensive toys, private school. She has you, David said simply. And the way you talk about her, I'm sure she knows how loved she is. That counts for more than anything material. Sarah studied him for a moment. There was something different about him, a maturity that went beyond age. He must have been in his mid-30s or early 40s. But there was also a hidden sadness, as if he understood the feeling of carrying weight alone. And you? Do you have family? David stirred the sugar in his coffee, thoughtful. I have parents, but our relationship is complicated. Different expectations about life, you know. They think I should be married, have kids, follow a specific path. Sometimes I feel like I'm living the life they planned. For me, not the one I would choose. And what life would you choose? The question caught David off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him what he really wanted, not what was expected of him as the heir of Almeida Tech Solutions? Something simpler, maybe. More real. He looked directly at her. Like this conversation. When was the last time you had a completely honest conversation with someone? Sarah laughed, a low and genuine sound. Last night, with my 8-year-old daughter. She asked me if I was happy, and I didn't know how to answer. And what would the answer be? I don't know. I think happiness is a big word for someone who's always worried about making it to the end of the month. But I have moments, good moments, like when Emily gets a good grade in school or when we watch movies together on Sunday. Little things. David nodded, understanding more than she realized. In his world of rooftop meetings and dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, he had forgotten the value of the little things. Time passed, without them noticing. 2 hours later, when Sarah looked at the clock, she was startled. Wow, I didn't even notice the time. I need to go pick up Emily from school. Of course. David stood up, once again pulling the chair for her. Can I see you again? Sarah hesitated. She had enjoyed his company, the honest conversation, the way he looked at her without judgment, but she also knew they came from different worlds. He probably lived in a nice apartment, had a car, an organized life, and she, well, she was a single mother, barely making ends meet. Yeah, I think so. They exchanged numbers, and as Sarah was leaving, David called out to her. Sarah? Yes? Thank you. For what? For being exactly who you are. As Sarah walked to the bus stop, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, some good things could still happen in her life. Across the street, David watched her disappear into the crowd, knowing that something fundamental had changed in his life that rainy March afternoon. 3 weeks passed since their first meeting, and Sarah found herself thinking about David more often than she would like to admit. He had texted every day, nothing intrusive, just asking about Emily, how her studies were going, little things that showed he was genuinely paying attention to what she said. Mom, you're smiling at your phone again, Emily observed from the sofa where she was doing her math homework. Is it Uncle David? Sarah blushed. He's not an uncle yet, sweetheart. We just met once. But you like him, right? You get all giddy when he texts. I don't get giddy, Sarah protested, but she knew her daughter was right. There was something about David that made her feel different, lighter perhaps, as if for a few moments she could forget the overdue bills and constant worries. The phone vibrated, a message from David. How about the farmer's market in Brooklyn on Saturday? I heard they have the best empanadas, if you want, of course. Sarah hesitated. Brooklyn was far, and the fare would be a stretch on her tight budget. But there was something about the invitation that drew her in, the simplicity, the normalcy of a date at a market. Okay, what time? Noon. I can pick you up. No need. We'll meet there. On Saturday morning, Sarah woke up with a strange anxiety. She rummaged through her small wardrobe, looking for something that wasn't too worn out, something that made her feel a bit more confident. She chose a blue and white striped blouse, the newest one she had, bought on sale 6 months ago, and a pair of jeans that were still in good condition. Mum, you look beautiful, Emily said, hugging her mother's legs. Uncle David will like it. Thank you, sweetheart. Mrs. Thompson is already downstairs, okay? You behave, all right? The farmer's market in Brooklyn was bustling when Sarah arrived, the smell of fried empanadas mixed with the aroma of ripe fruits and spices. Colorful stalls lined the street, vendors shouting deals, children running between the legs of adults. It was a world Sarah knew well, the world of people like her. She searched for David among the crowd and barely recognized him when she saw him. He was standing in front of a juice stall, looking around with an expression of someone who was completely out of place. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, but there was something in his posture, the way he held his wallet, that screamed he didn't belong there. "David!" Sarah waved, walking over to him. His face lit up when he saw her. Sarah, wow, what an amazing place. I've never been to a market like this. The phrase slipped out before he could think, and Sarah tilted her head, curious. Never. But you're not from New York. I am, but... David gestured vaguely. My family always shopped in other places. Markets, different ones. Sarah didn't press further but found it strange. Everyone in New York knew about the neighborhood markets. They were part of the city's culture, especially for someone like her who imagined he earned a consulting salary. "Come on, I'll show you the best empanada vendors," she said, naturally taking his arm. Her touch sent a shiver through David, not from the cold, but from an emotion he couldn't name. When was the last time someone had touched him so spontaneously, so naturally? In his world, everything was calculated, procedural. They headed to a stall in the middle of the market, where an older man in his 60s with a greying moustache and an oil-stained apron was frying empanadas in a huge pan. "Mr. Johnson," Sarah greeted the man with familiarity, "I brought a friend to try your famous empanadas." "Sarah, my girl, it's been so long. How's Emily?" "She's well, thank you. Growing up beautifully." David watched the interaction with fascination. There was a warmth there, a genuineness in the relationships he rarely saw. In his social circle, conversations always revolved around business, status, appearances. "And what will it be for the lovebirds?" Mr. Johnson asked with a mischievous smile. "2 beef and 1 cheese, Sarah ordered, then looked at David. "You eat beef, right? You're not a vegetarian or anything?" "I do, no problem." David took out his wallet, but Sarah was quicker. "Let me handle it. You're my guest." "Sarah, you don't have to." "Of course I do. You paid for the coffee last time." David wanted to protest. The cost of those empanadas was insignificant to him, but significant to her. But there was a pride in Sarah's voice that he recognized and respected. They found a place to sit at a plastic table in the middle of the market. The first empanada was scalding hot, and David almost burned his tongue. "Slow down," Sarah laughed. "First market empanada, huh?" David stopped chewing. "How do you know?" "By the way you're eating, everyone burns their mouth on the first empanada. It's like a rite of passage." They laughed together, and David realized he hadn't laughed like that in months, maybe years. A loose, spontaneous laugh, without calculating whether it was appropriate or if he was projecting the right image. "Tell me about Emily," he asked, genuinely interested. Sarah's face lit up. "Oh, she's amazing, stubborn like her mother, but with a huge heart. Last week she spent her entire allowance, which isn't much, but still, buying food for a stray dog that showed up at school. She came home with no money but beaming because she saved Bob." "Bob?" "The name she gave the dog. She has this habit of naming every animal she finds. There's a cat that passes by our building that she calls Napoleon because, according to her, he has the face of an emperor." David smiled, imagining an 8-year-old girl with her mother's strong personality. "She sounds special." "She is." Sarah's voice softened. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'm not being a good enough mum, you know. I work a lot, study at night, come home dead tired. She ends up taking care of me more than I do." "Of her?" "I'm sure that's not true. Last week, for example, I had a tough exam at college, was super nervous. She made tea, terrible by the way, because she put in too much sugar, but brought it to me in bed and said, 'Mum, you're the smartest person I know. It's going to be okay.' 8 years old, David. She's 8 and already takes care of me." David felt a tightness in his chest. His childhood had been different, materially privileged but emotionally cold. Parents always busy with business, nannies changing every few months, a loneliness disguised as luxury. "She learned that from you," he said. "That strength, that ability to care for others. You taught her that." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "How can you be so sure? You barely know me." "I know enough." David held her hand across the table. "You work 2 jobs, study at night, raise a daughter alone, and still find energy to worry about whether you're being a good mum. Any child would be lucky to have you as a mother." For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. She was used to criticism, to judgments about her choices, her situation. Hearing someone recognize her, the effort to validate her dedication was an almost unfamiliar sensation. "Thank you," she murmured, squeezing his hand back. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the farmer's market. David tried sugarcane juice for the first time, grimaced at the acidity, and laughed when Sarah teased him about his reaction. They bought fruits, mango, pineapple, apple, and David insisted on paying, arguing it was market research for his consulting projects. When they stopped at an accessory stall, Sarah fell in love with a pair of simple silver earrings with small, blue stones. She picked them up, looked at the price, and discreetly put them back. "Did you like them?" David asked. "They're pretty, but I don't need new earrings." David noticed the price, $15. To him, it was insignificant. To her, it probably meant choosing between the earrings and another essential expense. When Sarah got distracted looking at a blouse, he quietly returned and bought the earrings. "Here," he said when they reunited. "A gift." Sarah's eyes widened. "David, I can't accept this." "Why not?" Because we hardly know each other. Because I don't want you to think I'm interested in your money. Because you deserve beautiful things," David interrupted. "And because I'm sure you would do the same for someone you cared about." Sarah held the small package, touched. "Thank you. Really." When they said goodbye at the end of the afternoon, David watched her enter the subway. There was something wrong with the image. Her in a crowded car, pressed against others, going home on public transport after a day that for him had been an adventure, but for her was a luxury she could barely afford. For the first time since he met her, David realized the true extent of the differences between them. And for the first time in his life, his wealth didn't make him feel powerful. It made him feel guilty. As he waited for his private driver to pick him up, David looked around the market that was beginning to dismantle. Vendors counting the day's earnings, families carrying bags with their weekly groceries, tired children being carried in arms. It was a whole world that existed parallel to his. A real world where people struggled, dreamed, loved, without the privileges he had always considered normal. And at the center of that world was Sarah, strong, dedicated, real in a way he had forgotten was possible. That night, alone in his penthouse apartment in Midtown, David wondered for the first time if a simple life would truly be a lesser life. May arrived, bringing with it the typical warmth of autumn in New York and a feeling that things were finally falling into place in Sarah's life. Her meetings with David had become a constant, always in simple places, always with conversations that lasted for hours. He seemed genuinely interested in her world, asking questions about college, about Emily, about her dreams. It was a Friday night when the phone rang. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner while Emily did her homework at the small table that served both for meals and studies. "Hello? Sarah, this is the nurse from the pediatric emergency room at General Hospital. Your daughter was admitted here 20 minutes ago." Sarah's world stopped. The phone almost slipped from her hands. "What do you mean?" "She's here with me." And Emily Johnson, 8 years old, was admitted with a severe asthma attack. She was brought in by the school. Sarah looked at the table, empty. How had she not noticed? She ran to the bedroom, also empty. Her heart raced when she saw the note on the fridge, written in Emily's neat handwriting. "Mum, I went to the school's rehearsal for the spring festival. I'll be back by 8 p.m. Love you." "Oh my God, I'm coming!" Sarah shouted into the phone, already grabbing her bag and running down the stairs. The journey to the hospital was a nightmare. Stuck traffic on the highway, crowded bus, Sarah squeezing between others while her mind imagined the worst scenarios. Emily, having another attack, alone, scared. The attacks were becoming more frequent, and the doctor had warned about the possibility of hospitalization if they couldn't better control the asthma. When she finally arrived at the hospital, she found Emily in the pediatric emergency room, with an oxygen mask on her face and frightened eyes. The physical education teacher, Christina, was by the bedside. "Sarah, thank God you made it." Christina stood up, clearly shaken. It was during the rehearsal. She was dancing, and suddenly she started coughing and couldn't breathe anymore. "I've never seen anything like it." Sarah held Emily's small hand, trying not to show the panic she felt. "How are you, sweetheart?" Emily tried to speak, but the doctor interrupted. "She needs to be monitored for at least 12 hours. The attack was severe. Do you have health insurance?" Sarah felt her stomach drop. "No, just through Medicaid." The doctor nodded professionally, but Sarah caught the look. She knew what it meant. Basic care, long wait, limited medications. It wasn't the doctor's fault. It was the system. "We're going to admit her now. You can stay with her." The next 12 hours were a silent hell. Sarah didn't leave Emily's bedside, holding her hand, softly telling stories, humming the songs she used to sing when her daughter was a baby. Emily slept little, waking several times with shortness of breath. On Saturday morning, when they were finally discharged, Sarah looked at the bill handed to her. Medications, nebulization, tests, $450, almost the total amount of her college tuition. "Mum, we don't have that money, do we?" Emily asked quietly while they waited for the bus. The question broke Sarah's heart. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to worry about money, especially when recovering from an asthma attack. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart. We always do." But Sarah knew this time would be different. She had already split the last bills. Sophia's doctors were behind on her college tuition, borrowing money from Mrs. Thompson. Options were running out. During the afternoon, while Sophia rested, Sarah calculated and recalculated. She could ask for extra hours at work, but that would mean less time to study. She could try for a loan, but with her name in bad standing, it was nearly impossible. She could take a semester off from college, work 2 jobs, pay off the medical debts. The thought made her physically nauseous. Taking time off meant delaying her dreams once again. It meant continuing to clean offices for the rest of her life, while others pursued their ambitions. Her phone rang. David. "Hey, how was Sophia's summer festival?" Sarah had completely forgotten she had told him about the rehearsal. Now the festival felt like it had happened in another lifetime. "David, she had a crisis. She spent the night in the hospital." Silence on the other end of the line. "Is she okay now?" "She is, but—" Sarah couldn't continue. She was too tired to maintain the facade that she could handle everything alone. "Where are you?" "At home. She's sleeping. Can I come over?" Sarah hesitated. David had never been to her apartment. They always met in neutral places, cafes, farmers' markets, parks. The idea of him seeing where they actually lived, the poverty disguised as simplicity, made her feel vulnerable. "You don't need to. We're fine." "Sarah." His voice became firmer. "Can I come over?" 40 minutes later, David was at the building's door. Sarah went down to meet him. She didn't want him to come up and see. The tiny apartment, the sofa that served as a bed for Sophia, the nearly empty fridge. "How is she?" was the first thing he asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice. "Better. Tired, but better." Sarah leaned against the building wall, suddenly exhausted. It was 12 tense hours. David watched her, her eyes swollen from fatigue, her posture hunched from carrying too much weight on her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly. "And you? How are you?" The simple question broke down Sarah's last defenses. The tears she had held back all night finally fell. Don't know what to do anymore, David. The crises are becoming more frequent. The doctor said she needs more specialized care, more expensive medications, and I can barely pay the basic bills. I'm thinking about taking a break from college. David felt as if someone had punched him in the stomach. Here was an extraordinary woman fighting against a system that seemed to conspire against people like her, considering giving up her dreams for a lack of money that was insignificant to him. "How much does the treatment cost?" he asked carefully. "It's not just the treatment, it's everything. The hospital bill from yesterday, the medications, the consultations, it adds up to about $2,000 a month. That's more than my entire salary." David closed his eyes. $2,000. He spent more than that on a single meal at some of the restaurants he frequented. The difference between their worlds had never been so stark. Sarah. No. She wiped her tears, hardening again. "I know what you're going to say, that you can lend me money, that we can figure something out. But I can't accept that, David. I can't become a charity case for you. It's not charity. What is it? We've known each other for 2 months. You owe me nothing." David wanted to say so many things. He wanted to say that she had changed his life, that thinking about her and Sophia had become part of his daily routine, that he would give anything to take that look of despair off her face. But he knew Sarah didn't want to hear that right now. "Can I at least come up to see how she is?" Sarah hesitated but nodded. They climbed the 3 flights of stairs. The elevator had been broken for months, in silence. When David entered the apartment, he tried not to show surprise. He had imagined it would be small, but the reality was even more striking. A tiny living room with a sofa, a small television, and a table. A kitchen that resembled a hallway. A bedroom that barely fit a twin bed. Sophia was sleeping on the sofa, breathing with a slight wheeze. Even in sleep, she seemed smaller, more fragile than David had imagined from Sarah's descriptions. "She's beautiful," he whispered. Sarah smiled for the first time since the hospital. "She looks just like her dad, but she has my genes." David knelt beside the sofa, watching the girl sleep. There was an innocence there that moved him deeply. Sophia was not to blame for being born into a family without resources, not to blame for having asthma, and she didn't deserve to worry about money at 8 years old. "She already knows you from the pictures," Sarah said softly. "She keeps asking when she will meet you in person. We can plan something when she's better." "David." Sarah sat in the kitchen chair, too tired to keep pretending everything was okay. "I think we need to take a break." The words hit David like a bullet. "What? You're an incredible person, truly. But our worlds are very different. I have to focus on Sophia now. I have to make tough decisions about our future. And I can't emotionally depend on someone who will leave when they see how complicated our life is. I'm not going anywhere." "You will, David. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will. Because this isn't a life for you. Hospitals in the middle of the night, bills that don't add up, an apartment that barely fits. 2 people. You deserve someone easier. Easier how? Easier." David knelt in front of Sarah, holding her hands between his. "Look at me." When she finally met his gaze, he continued, "I never wanted easy. Easy is what I've always had, and it left me completely empty. You and Sophia, you make me want to be a better person. David, give me a chance. Don't, I'll solve your money problems. I understand you don't want that, but let me stay. Let me be a part of this." Sarah looked at Emily sleeping, then at David. There was a sincerity in his eyes that she wanted to believe. But there was also a terrible fear of opening up, of trusting, of believing that someone could really want to share the weight of her life. "One chance," she finally said. "But if you run away at the first sign of trouble—" "I won't run away." At that moment, David made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to help Sarah and Emily without making her feel humiliated. He would find a way to be present without taking control. Because for the first time in his life, he had found something worth more than all the money in the world. A family he wanted to protect. June arrived with the characteristic chill of New York's early summer and a subtle change in Sarah's routine. David had become a constant but respectful presence. He showed up on weekends with ingredients to cook together, took Emily for walks in the park when Sarah needed to study, and always found discreet ways to help without making it seem like charity. It was a typical Saturday when Emily finally met David in person. Sarah was tidying up the apartment when she heard laughter. Coming from the living room, Emily, who had woken up that morning complaining that she had nothing interesting to do, was now sitting on the floor, fascinated as David built a complex tower with wooden blocks. "Mom, look at the giant tower Uncle David made," Emily shouted excitedly. "It wasn't just me. The chief engineer was you," David replied, smiling at the girl. "Without your technical specifications, this tower would have collapsed a long time ago." Sarah watched the interaction from the doorframe. There was something natural in the way David talked to Emily. It wasn't the condescending tone that many adults used with children, but a genuine conversation, equal to equal. "Uncle David, do you have kids?" Emily asked with the typical curiosity of children. "I don't." "Why not?" David stopped building the blocks and looked at Emily. "I never found someone special enough to build a family with." "And now, have you found someone?" Sarah felt her face heat up. David looked in her direction and smiled. "I think so." The rest of the morning passed peacefully. David helped Emily with a science project about the solar system. They improvised a lunch with what they had in the fridge, and when Emily napped after eating, Sarah and David finally had time to talk alone. "She liked you," Sarah said, sitting next to him on the small sofa. "And I loved her. She's an amazing girl, Sarah. Smart, funny, caring, and stubborn. Don't forget about the stubbornness. Inherited from her mother, from what I've noticed." Sarah laughed, resting her head on David's shoulder. It was the first time she allowed herself to relax completely in weeks. The hospital bills were being paid in small installments. Emily had gone almost a month without crises, and for the first time, in a long time, she felt part of something bigger than her daily struggle for survival. "David? Thank you. For staying, for not running away when things got complicated." David kissed the top of her head. "There's no place I'd rather be." It was true. In the last 2 months, David had cancelled meetings, rejected social invitations, and rearranged his schedule to spend more time with Sarah and Emily. His secretary, Patricia, had commented several times about the change in his behavior. "Mr. Smith, are you sure you want to cancel dinner with the Japanese investors?" she had asked, the previous Friday. "I have other commitments," David had replied, without explaining that his commitment was helping an 8-year-old with math homework. His family was also starting to notice his absence. Mrs. Helena Smith, his mother, was constantly calling to ask why he was missing important social events. "David, dear, Senator Martin's daughter asked about you at the Ferreira wedding. A lovely girl, graduated in Europe. She would be a great match." "I'm not interested in any matches right now, Mom. But you need to think about the future of the company, the family legacy." David hung up those calls, increasingly irritated. How could he explain to his mother that he had found something infinitely more valuable than strategic alliances and convenient marriages? It was on a Wednesday afternoon in mid-June that everything began to complicate. David was at the office of Smith Tech Solutions, participating in a video conference with international investors, when his secretary knocked on the door. Mr. Smith, sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency. David immediately thought of Sarah and Emily. What happened? Your mother is downstairs in the lobby. She said she needs to speak with you urgently. David sighed. Mrs. Helena never showed up at the office unannounced, unless it was something really important, or something she considered important. Tell the investors I'll resume the meeting in 15 minutes. In the elevator down to the lobby, David tried to imagine what his mother wanted. When the doors opened, he saw her immediately. Mrs. Helena Smith, 62 years old, elegant demeanor, impeccably dressed as always, talking to the building's security manager with that authority that came from decades of being one of the most powerful women in New York. "Mum, what happened?" "David, we need to talk, in private." They went up to his office in silence. David knew that tone. His mother had discovered something and was not happy. "Sit down," she said, even though they were in his office. David sat down, crossing his arms. "I'm listening." "I hired a private investigator." "Excuse me." "To find out why my son, at 36 years old, single, heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country, has been missing for 2 months. David felt his blood run cold. "You did what?" "And I discovered some very interesting things." Mrs. Helena opened her bag and took out a folder. "Sarah Johnson, 30 years old, single mother, works as a cleaning assistant, lives in a 2-room apartment on the east side, an 8-year-old daughter with chronic asthma. She studies business administration at a 2nd-tier private college." Each word felt like a slap. David stood up, furious. "How dare you? How do I dare? David, you are a Smith. You have responsibilities, a name to uphold, a company to run, and you're wasting time with a... "Watch what you're about to say," David interrupted, his voice dangerously low. "With a woman who is obviously interested in your money." "Sarah doesn't know who I am." Mrs. Thompson laughed, a harsh and disbelieving sound. "Please, David, do you think she's an idiot? Of course she knows." "She doesn't know, Mom. To her, I'm a consultant who works with companies." Mrs. Thompson's laughter died. "You lied to her?" "I omitted information." "For 2 months?" David didn't respond. When put that way, it sounded even worse than he imagined. "David, this is ridiculous. You can't build a relationship based on lies, and even if you could, she's not suitable for you." "Suitable according to whom?" "According to reality, son. You come from completely different worlds. What do you think will happen when she discovers the truth? That she'll be happy to have been deceived, or that she'll want her share of the family fortune?" David moved closer to the window, looking at the city below. Somewhere in that urban expanse, Sarah was working, cleaning offices, dreaming of a better future for herself and Emily. And here he was, in his glass and steel tower, discussing her as if she were a business problem to be solved. "She's not like that. All women are like that, David. When there's money involved, all women are like that." "Sarah isn't." "Then test it." David turned around. "How?" "Tell her the truth. Today. Now. Let's see how long it takes for her to show up here asking for child support." His mother's words hit him like poison, not because he believed them, but because they planted a seed of doubt he didn't want to admit existed. "Get out of my office!" "David, get out!" Mrs. Thompson stood up, gathering her papers with offended dignity. "You'll regret this, son, and when you do, remember that I warned you." After she left, David was alone in his office looking at the city, through the window on the 40th floor. For the first time since he met Sarah, he allowed himself to question his own motivations. Could it be that his mother was right? Not about Sarah being materialistic. He was absolutely sure of that. But about the lie, about the impossibility of building something real based on such a significant omission. He picked up the phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Hello? Sarah, it's me." "Hi, how are you? I thought you were working." The genuine joy in her voice made him feel even worse. "I am. Listen, can we talk tonight? It's important." "Sure. Did something happen?" No, I just need to tell you some things." After hanging up, David stared at the phone for a long time. That night, he would have to make the hardest decision of his life. Tell the truth and risk losing Sarah forever, or continue lying and build a relationship based on falsehood. In either case, he knew nothing would be the same after that conversation. On the other side of the city, Sarah put her phone away with a smile on her face. David seemed more serious lately, more thoughtful. Maybe it was work stress. She would make a special dinner that night, something to cheer him up. She had no idea that her life was about to change completely. The Wednesday night was cold and rainy when David arrived at Sarah's apartment. He had spent the entire day rehearsing how he would tell the truth, but now, standing in front of the familiar door, all the words felt inadequate. He took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. "Uncle David!" Emily opened the door before Sarah even arrived, throwing herself into his arms with the typical energy of a child. "Mom made spaghetti, your favorite!" David hugged the girl, feeling his heart tighten. How could he explain to an 8-year-old that he had lied about who he really was? How could he look into those trusting eyes and destroy the image she had built of him? "Emily, go finish your homework," Sarah appeared, drying her hands on her apron. She looked more beautiful than ever, wearing a blue blouse that highlighted her eyes and with her hair flowing over her shoulders. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. "Oh, Mom, but I want to talk to Uncle David." "You can talk after dinner. Go." Emily pouted, but obeyed. David watched the interaction, memorizing every detail. Sarah's loving authority, Emily's reluctant but respectful obedience, the simple harmony of a family that functioned despite all difficulties. "You seem strange," Sarah observed, studying his face. "Did something happen at work?" David sat on the small sofa, his hands trembling slightly. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." The serious tone made Sarah stop what she was doing. She turned off the stove and came to sit beside him, suddenly apprehensive. "You're scaring me. That wasn't my intention. It's just that—" David ran his hands through his hair, a habit Sarah had learned to recognize when he was nervous. "Remember when we met and I said I worked in consulting?" "I remember." "Well, it wasn't exactly a lie. I really do consulting, but for my own company." Sarah tilted her head, confused. "I don't understand." David took a deep breath. "My full name is David Smith. David Smith, of Smith Tech Solutions." For a moment, Sarah didn't react. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place where she knew it from. "Smith Tech Solutions," she repeated slowly. "Wait, isn't that huge company? The one with the building on Faria Lima?" "Yes." "And you work there?" David closed his eyes. "I'm the owner, Sarah, CEO and main shareholder. The company has been in my family for 3 generations. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at him, trying to process the information. The simple man who shared empanadas with her, who took the bus, who sat on the floor of her tiny apartment to play with Emily, was a billionaire? "This is a joke, right?" she finally said, her voice weak. "It's not a joke." Sarah abruptly stood up, starting to pace the small room, like a caged animal. No, this doesn't make sense. You came by bus to meet me at the farmer's market. You shared a $10 empanada with me. I lied. Or rather, I omitted the truth. Why? The words came out like a contained scream, filled with pain and confusion. "Why did you do this to me?" David stood up as well, trying to approach, but Sarah stepped back. Because in my entire life, everyone who got close to me was interested in my money. Everyone. And when I met you, you were different. You looked at me as a person, not as a bank account. I didn't want to lose that. So you lied. I omitted. No, Sarah shouted, causing Emily to run out of her room. Mum, what happened? Go back to your room, sweetie, please. But go back to your room. Emily, frightened by the tone she had never heard from her mother, quickly obeyed. Sarah waited to hear the door close before continuing, her voice now low but filled with anger. Don't try to downplay it. You lied. For 2 months, you lied to me. You let me pay for dinners, share empanadas, worry about whether I was spending too much when I was with you. You let me talk about my financial struggles, about how hard it is to raise a child alone, about my dreams of giving my daughter a better life. Tears began to stream down her face. You must have laughed so much at me. I never laughed at you, never. Of course you did. The poor girl who worries about $15 for earrings, who counts pennies at the grocery store, who almost drops out of college because she can't pay her daughter's medical bills. It must have been so funny for you. Sarah, stop. You know that's not how it is. I know. What do I know, David? I don't even know who you are. David tried to approach again. I'm the same person you met. Money doesn't change that. Sarah laughed, a bitter and painful sound. Doesn't change? You think it doesn't change? David, you're a billionaire, and I clean offices to survive. You have employees who probably earn more in a day than I do in a month. That doesn't matter. Of course it matters. It matters because you lied about it. It matters because when Emily got sick at the hospital, I was desperate thinking about how I would pay the bills, while you could probably buy the entire hospital without even feeling it. David lowered his head. She was right, and he knew it. Did you have a lot of fun, pretending to be normal, experimenting with what life is like for poor mortals? It wasn't like that. Then how was it? Sarah stared at him, her eyes red with anger and hurt. Explain to me how it was. David searched for the right words, knowing there were none. It was real. For the first time in my life, it was real. You looked at me as David, not as the heir of Smith. Emily laughed at my jokes because they were funny, not because I had money. You made me feel normal, human. Human, Sarah almost shouted again. You want to feel human? Try working 10 hours a day cleaning executive bathrooms, studying until 2 in the morning, waking up at 5 to take your child to the hospital, and at the end of the month, not having money to buy your daughter's medicine. That is being human, David. That is living for real. Her words hit him like a physical blow. David had never felt such intense emotional pain. Sarah, I know I made a mistake. A mistake? She laughed again, incredulous. David, you didn't forget to tell me you have a dog. You omitted that you're one of the richest people in the country. That's not a mistake, it's a betrayal. I can explain. Explain what? How you had fun pretending to be poor. How interesting it was to date someone from your social project? You're not a social project. No? Then what am I? The billionaire's anthropological experience, the real-life adventure before going back to your world of yachts and penthouses? David stepped closer, trying to touch her face, but Sarah violently pulled away. Don't touch me. Sarah, please, get out of my house. Let me explain properly. Get out of my house. The shout made Emily appear again at the door, now crying. Mom, Uncle David, why are you fighting? Sarah looked at her daughter and felt her heart shatter. Emily had grown so attached to David, talked about him constantly, drew their family of 3 in her school notebooks. How to explain that it had all been a lie? Emily, go back to your room, now. But Mom, now! David looked at Emily, who ran back to her room in tears, then looked at Sarah. The damage was done. There was no turning back. Sarah, go away, David. Go away and don't come back. I can't. I love you. The words came out before he could think, raw and desperate. Sarah stopped, her body trembling. How can you say that? How can you say you love me after what you did? Because it's true. I love you. I love you, and I love Emily. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. If you loved us, you wouldn't have lied. If I had told the truth on the first day, you would never have given me a chance. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. And you think you had the right to take that choice away from me, to decide for me whether I could? Adaptações, Gabriel Almeida, David Smith, Marina Santos, Sarah Johnson, Sofia, Emily, Hospital das Clínicas, General Hospital, Capão Redondo, East Side, Café Girondino, Café Latte, Itaim Bibi, Downtown, Conceição, Mrs. Thompson, Edifício Copacabana, The Skyline Building, Vila Olímpia, Midtown, Pastéis de São Paulo, Empanadas, Feira da Vila Madalena, Farmers Market in Brooklyn, Dona Conceição, Mrs. Thompson, Seu Joaquim, Mr. Johnson, Cachorro de Rua, Stray Dog, Macaronada, Spaghetti, Almeida Tech Solutions, Smith Tech Solutions. How are you going to deal with your financial situation? David didn't respond because he knew she was right. Leave, Sarah repeated, now more calmly, but with a firmness that was even more devastating than the shouting. Leave and don't come back. Don't call, don't text, don't... Show up here, it's over. Sarah, it's over. David grabbed his jacket and walked to the door. At the exit, he turned one last time. One day you will understand that everything I felt for you was real. One day you will understand that true love doesn't start with lies. The door closed with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot. David stood in the hallway for a few minutes, listening to the muffled sound of Sarah crying on the other side of the wall. When he finally went down the stairs, he knew he had lost the only thing in life that truly mattered, and the blame was entirely his. Inside the apartment, Sarah slid down the door until she sat on the floor, hugging her knees. Emily appeared timidly. "Mum, is Uncle David coming back?" Sarah pulled her daughter onto her lap, both now crying. "No, sweetheart, he's not coming back." "Why not?" Sarah didn't know how to respond. How to explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes adults do things that hurt so much that there's no fixing it. Because sometimes people are different from what we thought they were. That night, neither Sarah nor Emily could eat the spaghetti that had cooled in the pot. And far away, David was alone in his penthouse, looking out the window at the city, and wondering if he would ever be able to forgive himself for what he had done. August arrived like a month of forced hibernation for Sarah. She dove into her studies and worked with an almost desperate intensity, as if the exhausting routine could erase the memories of the last 2 months. She woke up at 5 in the morning, took Emily to school, worked in the office building until 5 in the afternoon, rushed to college and only got home at 11 at night, too exhausted to think, but Emily wouldn't let her forget. "Mum, why doesn't Uncle David come anymore?" the girl asked for the 20th time in 2 weeks, while distractedly playing with dinner. Sarah sighed, trying to find an answer that wouldn't hurt more than it already had. "I already explained to you, sweetheart. Sometimes people need to follow different paths. But I miss him." The simple words from her daughter were like knives to Sarah's heart. She missed him too, a physical, painful longing that struck her at the most unexpected moments. When she passed by the farmer's market in Brooklyn, when she saw a man from behind who for a second looked like David, when she found the block tower they had built together still standing in the corner of the living room. "I know, sweetheart, I miss him too." Emily looked at her mother with that strange perception that children sometimes have. "Did you cry because of him?" Sarah didn't lie. "I did." "Did he do something really bad?" He wasn't honest with us about some important things." Emily was thoughtful for a moment. Like when I lied about doing my homework, but I actually hadn't. Similar, but more complicated. When I lied, you were upset, but then you forgave me. The child's simple logic was like a punch to Sarah's stomach. How to explain that some lies were too big to forgive? How to explain the difference between forgetting to do homework and building an entire relationship based on falsehood? On the other side of the city, David was living his own version of hell. The first few days after the separation were the worst. He had tried to call dozens of times, but Sarah had blocked his number. He tried sending flowers, but they were returned. He spent an entire afternoon in front of the building where she worked, but when he saw her coming out, the look of desolation on her face stopped him from approaching. "Mr. Smith?" Patricia, his secretary, entered the room hesitantly. "You have a meeting with the directors in 5 minutes." David was looking out the window, lost in thought. In recent weeks, he had become a stranger to himself. The man who once led meetings with military precision could now barely concentrate for more than a few minutes at a time. "Sir, cancel." "But sir, this is the third meeting you've cancelled this week." "I said cancel, Patricia." The secretary left without further questioning, but David knew that his behavior was generating comments in the company. His father, Robert Smith, had shown up at the office the previous week, concerned about the reports he was receiving about his son's erratic behavior. "David, what's going on? The shareholders are starting to ask questions." "Everything is under control." "It doesn't seem like it. Marcus told me you rejected 3 acquisition proposals without even properly analyzing them." David turned to his father. Robert Smith, at 65, still maintained the elegant posture and keen gaze that had made him one of the most respected businessmen in the country. They weren't interesting deals. "David," his father's voice grew more serious, "your mother told me about this situation, about the woman. The woman has a name. Sarah. Whatever her name is, you need to forget this and get back to focusing on what really matters." "And what really matters, Dad?" "Family, the company, your responsibility to hundreds of employees who depend on your decisions." David laughed, a harsh sound. "Responsibility. For 36 years, I did exactly what you expected. I studied where you wanted, worked where you decided, went to the places you approved. And when I finally find something that makes me happy, you want me to forget it." "Happiness is a luxury, David. We are a family of business." "Maybe that's the problem." Robert sighed, his expression softening slightly. "Son, I know you're suffering. But this woman, you two and David stood at the crossroads of 2 very different worlds. Even if she wasn't materialistic, she's not materialistic. Even if she wasn't, how would you build a life together? Would she feel comfortable in our social circle? Would you feel comfortable in hers? And the kids? What kind of world would they live in?" The questions echoed in David's mind for days. Not because he doubted his feelings for Sarah, but because he recognized the real complexity of the situation. Even if she forgave him for the lie, how would they navigate the social and economic differences? It was on a Thursday afternoon that David made a decision that would change everything. He was driving by Emily's school when he saw her walking out alone with her heavy backpack. On impulse, he stopped the car. "Emily!" The girl turned around, her face lighting up. "Uncle David!" She ran to him, throwing herself into his arms with the same energy as always. David hugged her, feeling a mix of joy and pain. "How are you, Princess?" "Sad," Emily replied with the typical honesty of children. "I miss you, and Mom is sad too, even when she pretends she's not." "Does your mom know you're here with me?" Emily shook her head. "She's working. I always go home alone." David knelt down to be at her level. "Emily, do you want me to take you home?" "Can you?" I can, but your mom might not like it. Emily thought for a moment, the seriousness of a child making an important decision on her face. Will she be mad? Maybe. But you'll explain that you're not bad? The simple question hit David deeply. Do you think I'm not bad? Of course not. You're nice. You play with me. You make my mom smile. Bad people don't do that. During the drive to the east side, Emily chattered about school, her friends, and how she was helping her mom more at home, because she noticed that she was tired. David listened, recording every word, knowing it could be the last time he saw her. When they arrived at the building, David saw Sarah coming home from work. She was getting off the bus, carrying a heavy bag, her face tired from a long day. When she saw David and Emily together, her face went through a quick sequence of expressions: surprise, anger, pain. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "Mom, Uncle David brought me from school." Sarah quickly approached, grabbing Emily by the hand. "I told you not to talk to strangers." "But he's not a stranger, he's Uncle David." "David is a stranger now, Emily." The words hit like a slap. David stepped closer, trying to speak softly so as not to alarm Emily more than she already was. "Sarah, please, I just want to talk. We have nothing to talk about." "We do. About us, about what we built." "We built nothing," Sarah interrupted, then took a deep breath, remembering that Emily was listening. "Emily, go upstairs now." "But Mom, now, Emily." The girl looked between the two adults, sensing the tension, and reluctantly obeyed. When she disappeared into the building, Sarah turned to David with all the fury she had contained over the past weeks. "How dare you pick up my daughter from school without my permission?" "She was walking home alone, Sarah, an 8-year-old walking alone in the city." "That's not your problem. You're not her father." "I could be." The words slipped out before he could think, and Sarah recoiled as if she had been attacked. "You could be? David, you lied to us for 2 months. Do you think a lie is a foundation for building a family? I know I made a mistake. Stop calling it a mistake. It was a deliberate and calculated choice." David ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "Okay, you're right. It was a wrong choice. But Sarah, what I felt for you, for both of you, was real. And I know you felt something too. What I felt was for a person who doesn't exist. I exist. The David who played with Emily, who talked to you for hours, who kissed you. That David exists. That David is rich, David. A billionaire. And that changes everything." "Why does it change?" Sarah looked at him incredulously. "You really don't understand, do you? David, you have a fortune I can't even imagine. I work cleaning offices. If we were together, what would I be? Your kept woman? The poor girl you saved? You would be my partner." "Would I? And when you got tired of playing simple life? When your parents, your friends, your family started pressuring you to find someone more suitable?" David didn't respond because he knew she was right. His family would never accept Sarah, and the pressure would be constant. "That's it," Sarah said, seeing his silence as confirmation. "Deep down, you know they're right. We come from worlds that are too different." "Sarah, go away, David, and this time don't come back. Emily has suffered enough." Sarah started to walk away, but David gently held her arm. "Just answer me one thing. Did you love me? Before you found out the truth, did you love me?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears. "That's the cruelest part of all this. Yes, David, I loved you. I loved you so much that I was starting to dream of a future for us 3. And now I know that all of that was based on a lie." She pulled away and entered the building without looking back. David stood on the sidewalk for almost an hour, staring at her apartment windows, watching the lights turn on, imagining the simple life happening inside, a life he had been a part of and from which he was now forever excluded. When he finally left, he knew he had to make a definitive decision. Either accept that he had lost Sarah forever and try to rebuild his old life, or find a way to prove that he could change everything. Their love was greater than social differences and the lies of the past. The problem was that she had no idea how to make the second option work. September arrived with its chilly mornings and the promise of better days that Sarah desperately tried to believe in. She had found a routine that, if it didn't make her happy, at least kept her functioning. Work, college, Emily. Work, college, Emily. Like a mantra that prevented her from thinking about anything else. It was a Tuesday when she was cleaning the 37th floor of the Skyline building that her life crumbled again. Sarah was mopping the hallway floor when she heard voices coming from the boardroom. "Unfortunately, we will have to let go of all the cleaning staff. The company taking over the contract brings its own team," said a male voice that Sarah recognized as the administrative manager. She stopped cleaning, her heart racing. She couldn't have understood correctly. "And when is this going to happen?" asked another voice. "Next Monday. I've already informed HR to prepare the terminations." Sarah gripped the mop tightly, her legs shaking. Monday, 6 days away, 6 days to find another job, pay the bills that were already overdue, keep up with the college tuition. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sarah finished her work on autopilot, greeted her colleagues as usual, but her mind was in total panic. She got home at 6 in the evening and locked herself in the tiny bathroom, finally letting the tears of despair fall. "Mom, are you okay?" Emily knocked on the door. Sarah took a deep breath, wiped her face, and opened the door, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Why wouldn't I be? You look sad." Her daughter's perception was sometimes frightening. "I'm just a little tired. How was school today?" Emily chattered about her science class while Sarah prepared dinner, but her mind was doing desperate calculations. She had $300 in savings, the money she was saving to buy Emily's birthday present next month. The tuition was due on Friday. The rent was due on the 15th. Emily's medications were running out. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Sarah stayed in the small kitchen with a pile of bills in front of her, a calculator and a pen. No matter how much she crunched the numbers, they didn't add up. Even if she found another job immediately, which she knew was practically impossible, she wouldn't have enough money to get through the month. For the first time since Emily was born, Sarah seriously considered the possibility of not being able to take care of her daughter alone. The rest of the week passed in a desperate scramble for work. Sarah printed resumes at the local internet cafe, visited cleaning companies and responded to classified ads. But the answer was always the same. "Leave your resume, and we'll call you." And they never called. On Friday, her last day of work, Sarah cleaned the offices knowing it was the last time. At the end of the shift, the administrative manager called her in to sign the termination papers. "Sarah, you've been an exemplary employee these 2 years. I'm sure you'll find something better soon." She nodded, signing the documents with trembling hands. The severance amount was low, $1,200, deducting proportional vacation and charges. Enough to pay the rent and maybe buy food for 2 weeks. Nothing more. On her way home, Sarah stopped by the college to try to negotiate the tuition. The staff member at the office, a woman in her 50s with a stern face, got straight to the point. "Your student loan is already at its limit, and you have an overdue payment from last month. If you don't settle it by Monday, we'll have to cancel your enrollment. Please, I need a few more days. I lost my job today. Rules are rules, dear. I can't make exceptions." Sarah left the college feeling like she was sinking in quicksand. Every move she made to save herself only pulled her deeper. At home, she found Emily doing homework at the kitchen table, as always. The girl looked up at her with that radiant smile that brightened even the hardest days. "Hi, Mom. Guess what happened today?" Sarah forced a smile. "What is it, sweetheart?" "The teacher chose my drawing to put on the school mural. It's the drawing of us flying to Paris in an airplane, remember?" The drawing. Sarah remembered it perfectly. Emily had made it a few weeks ago when they were still dreaming of trips and a better future. Now Paris felt like it was on another planet. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. And there's more. Aunt Martha said that if I keep getting good grades, I can earn a scholarship to a private school next year. A real school, Mum." Sarah felt her heart shatter. How could she tell Emily that they might not even be able to keep her in public school? How could she explain that their dreams would have to be postponed once again? "That's amazing, Emily. You don't seem happy." Sarah knelt in front of her daughter, holding her small hands. "Sweetheart, Mommy needs to tell you something. I lost my job today." Emily was quiet for a moment, processing the information. "Does that mean we're going to have less money?" "It means it's going to be a bit harder for a while. But you'll find another job, right? You're really smart." The absolute confidence in Emily's voice felt like a stab. "I'll try, sweetheart. I'll try really hard." That night, after Emily fell asleep, Sarah stayed up late, watching her daughter sleep on the sofa. At 8 years old, Emily had already been through so much: asthma attacks, nights in the hospital, constant moves when money was tight. And now this. Sarah picked up her phone and looked at her contacts list. There was one name she had been avoiding for weeks: David. That moment, she considered calling him. He would certainly help her, without questions, without judgments, but the humiliation would be too great. After everything she had said about not wanting charity, how could she ask for help now? Instead, she called Carla, her best friend. "Sarah? What time is it?" "Carla, I'm sorry for calling so late. Can you lend me $1,000? Silence on the other end of the line. "Marie, you know that if I had it, I would lend it to you right away. But Pedro has been unemployed for 3 months and we can barely pay our own bills." Sarah closed her eyes. Of course. Everyone was struggling. The economic crisis didn't choose its victims. "It's okay, Carla. I'm sorry to bother you." "Marie, wait. Did something happen?" Sarah told her about losing her job, about the bills that weren't adding up, about the possibility of having to drop out of college. Carla listened in silence. "Marie, I know you don't want to hear this, but couldn't you talk to David?" "No." "Why?" "He obviously cares about you and Emily." "Because he lied to me, Carla, for 2 months. And because if I call him now, it will confirm exactly what his family thinks about me, that I'm just after his money. But you're not after his money. You're desperate. It's different." "Is it?" I'm sure he wouldn't see the difference. After hanging up, Sarah returned to the kitchen and looked again at the bills scattered on the table. Rent, $800. College tuition, $450. Emily's medications, $200. Food, electricity, water, transportation. She made a list of what she could cut. College. It was the only option. She could work 2 jobs, maybe earn about $1,500 a month. That would be enough to keep the apartment and take care of Emily. Dreams would have to wait. Once again. On Saturday morning, Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee when Emily appeared, still in her pajamas, carrying a shoebox. "Mom, can I show you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." Emily opened the box, revealing a small collection of coins and some crumpled bills. "It's my savings. I have $63. You can use it to help pay the bills." Sarah looked at the money Emily had saved over months. Coins found on the street. Change left. Over when Sarah sent her to buy bread, the symbolic $5 she sometimes received from her grandmother. It was all an 8-year-old had in the world, and she was offering it to help her mother. "Emily, that money is yours." But we're a family, right? Families help each other. Sarah pulled her daughter into her lap, trying not to cry in front of her. How could a child have so much generosity, so much maturity, so much love? Thank you, sweetheart. But you keep your money. Mommy will figure it out. Promise? Sarah looked into Emily's trusting eyes and made the only promise she knew she could keep. I promise I'll fight for both of us, always. That weekend, Sarah made the hardest decision of her adult life. On Monday morning, she went to college and officially withdrew from her classes. She spent the rest of the week looking for a job, accepting anything: cleaning lady, cashier, sales associate. It was on Thursday that she finally got something. 2 jobs, actually. Cleaning at a clinic in the morning and working at a diner in the afternoon. Together, they would bring in about $1,400 a month, enough to survive, but not to live. When she told Emily about withdrawing from college, the girl was quiet for a long time. Does that mean you won't study to be a manager anymore? Not right now, sweetheart. But one day, when things are better, I'll go back. Promise? Sarah looked at her daughter, knowing it might be a promise she could never keep, but needing to keep hope alive for both of them. I promise. That night, alone in the kitchen after Emily fell asleep, Sarah cried all the tears she had held back for days. She cried for the lost college opportunity, for the postponed dreams, for the feeling of failing as a mother. And she cried for David. For the first time since the separation, admitting to herself how much she missed him, how much she needed the emotional support he offered, how painful it was to go through all of this alone. On the other side of the city, David was in his office, working late to avoid going home and facing the emptiness of his life. He had no idea that the woman he loved was at that moment losing everything she had built, alone and too proud to ask for help. If he had known, he would have crossed the city in a rush to be by her side. But Sarah had built a wall between them, and on the outside of that wall, David could only imagine how she was, not knowing she needed him more than ever. October brought a brutal routine for Sarah. She woke up at 5 in the morning, dropped Emily off at school, worked at the clinic until 2 in the afternoon, rushed to the diner where she stayed until 10 at night. She came home exhausted, helped Emily with her homework, and collapsed into bed only to repeat it all the next day. It was on a Tuesday night when she was leaving the diner that Sarah had the first sign that something was wrong. A sudden dizziness made her lean against the wall of the establishment. Mrs. Marlene, the owner of the diner, a 60-year-old woman with a motherly heart, immediately noticed. "Sarah, you look pale. When was the last time you ate properly?" Sarah tried to remember. Breakfast. No, she had skipped it to avoid being late. Lunch. A quick sandwich between jobs. Dinner. She hadn't had dinner yet. "I'm fine, Mrs. Marlene, just tired." "Tired nothing. You're killing yourself, girl. Sit down and eat something before you go home." Sarah Sarah Johnson slowly ate a sandwich with salami and a glass of milk, while Mrs. Thompson watched her with concern. "Sarah, can I give you my opinion?" "Of course. You're working too much. I know you need the money, but at this rate you'll end up in the hospital. And who will take care of your little girl?" The words echoed in Sarah's mind throughout her journey back home. Mrs. Thompson was right. In recent days, she had experienced constant headaches, dizziness, and fatigue that wouldn't go away even with sleep. But she had no choice. 2 jobs were the bare minimum to keep the apartment and meet Emily's basic needs. At home, she found Emily sleeping at the kitchen table, her school notebooks scattered around. Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor who looked after her at night, was dozing in the armchair. "Mrs. Thompson?" Sarah gently touched the neighbor's shoulder. "Oh, Sarah, I didn't hear you come in. Emily was doing her homework, but I think sleep won." Sarah looked at her. A daughter. There were dark circles under Emily's eyes, and she seemed smaller, more fragile. The irregular meals and constant absence of her mother were taking their toll. Did she have dinner? Yes, but she ate little. She said she wasn't hungry. After Mrs. Thompson left, Sarah carried Emily to the sofa bed, took off her shoes, and covered her with a blanket. The girl woke up for a moment. "Mom? What time is it?" "Late, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. Are you okay? You look very tired." Even half asleep, Emily was worried about her. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. I'm fine. We'll talk in the morning, okay?" But the next morning, when Sarah went to wake Emily for school, the girl had a high fever. "Oh, my head hurts," Emily murmured, trying to sit up. Sarah touched her daughter's forehead. It was hot, very hot. The thermometer read 102 degrees Fahrenheit. "Mom, am I going to die?" Emily asked weakly. "Of course not, sweetheart. It's just the flu. But you're not going to school today." Sarah glanced at the clock. 7:30. In an hour, she had to be at the clinic. She called Mrs. Thompson, but the line was busy. She tried Carla, but it went straight to voicemail. She called the clinic. "Dr. Johnson, it's Sarah. My daughter has a high fever and I won't be able to work today." "Sarah, you know I can't accept any more absences. This is the second one this month." "I know, doctor, but if you don't come in today, I'll have to let you go. I have a waiting list of people wanting to work." Sarah closed her eyes. She couldn't afford to lose another job, but she also couldn't leave Emily alone with a high fever. I'll find a way. I'll find a... To get there. She hung up the phone and sat on the edge of the sofa, holding her head in her hands. Emily was watching with feverish eyes. "Mum, you can go to work. I'll stay alone." "An 8-year-old with a fever can't stay alone, Emily. But you need to work." The forced maturity in her daughter's voice broke Sarah's heart. No child should have to worry about these things. It was then that Sarah made a decision that went against all her principles, but she saw no other way. She grabbed her phone and searched for a number she had deleted but still remembered by heart. David answered on the second ring. "Sarah?" His voice, surprised and filled with emotion, almost made her hang up. "David, I'm sorry for calling. You don't have to apologize. Is everything okay? How's Emily?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Emily has a high fever. I have to work and I have no one to stay with her. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'm on my way now." "David, wait. You don't have to..." "Of course I do. What's the address again? And do you have a thermometer at home?" 20 minutes later, David was at the apartment door. Sarah opened it, and for a moment they stood looking at each other in silence. David looked thinner, more tired. There was a sadness in his eyes that she didn't remember seeing before. "How is she?" was the first thing he asked. "Fever of 102. Headache. I think it's the flu." David entered and went straight to the sofa where Emily was lying. The girl's face lit up when she saw him. "Uncle David, you came back." "Hi, Princess. I heard you're not feeling well." David knelt beside the sofa, gently touching Emily's forehead. His expression turned worried. "Sarah, I think she should see a doctor. A 102 fever in a child." "I know, but today is a work day, and if I miss again..." "You're going to lose your job," David completed, immediately understanding the situation. Sarah nodded, the humiliation clear on her face. "I'm sorry for calling. I know after everything that happened..." "Stop!" David stood up, looking directly at her. "You did the right thing by calling. Emily needs care and you need to work. I'll stay with her." "David, no discussion. Go to work." Sarah looked at Emily, who was watching the conversation with interest, then back at David. The gratitude she felt was immense, but also painful. "Thank you. I'll pay you." "Sarah," his voice became firmer. "No." All day, while working at the clinic, Sarah thought about David taking care of Emily. She called 3 times to check on her daughter, and with each call, David reassured her with detailed information about the temperature, the medication, and what Emily had eaten. "I took her to the pediatrician," he said on the last call. "Dr. Johnson at General Hospital. He said it's a strong flu, but nothing to worry about. He prescribed an antibiotic." "The General? David, that must have cost a fortune." "Sarah, stop worrying about money right now. Emily is better. Her fever has gone down to 99.5. That's what matters." When Sarah got home that night, she found David in the kitchen preparing a soup. Emily was on the sofa watching cartoons, visibly better. "Mom!" Emily jumped up to hug her. "Uncle David made soup and told me stories and played checkers with me." Sarah hugged her daughter, checking that the fever had gone down. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Uncle David is the best caregiver in the world." David appeared from the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. "The soup is almost ready. Emily already had dinner, but I thought you might like something warm." His kindness, after everything that had happened between them, left Sarah emotional. "David, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me." After Emily fell asleep, Sarah and David stayed in the small kitchen, sharing the soup in silence. It was David who broke the silence first. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you drop out of college?" Sarah stopped eating, her heart racing. "How do you know?" "I was there last week. I wanted to donate some equipment to the computer lab. I ended up asking about you." "And they told you?" "They said you dropped out for financial reasons." Sarah looked down, the humiliation hitting her hard. "I lost my job at the beginning of September. The company outsourced cleaning. I couldn't find another one that paid enough to keep college." "Why didn't you call me?" The question came out harsher than David intended. Sarah stared at him, her eyes watering. "Because you lied to me for 2 months, David. Because if I called asking for help, it would confirm everything your family thinks about me." "My family doesn't know you." "No. Then why did your mom hire private investigators to find out about my life?" David's eyes widened. "How did you know that?" "The investigator was very discreet. He asked Mrs. Thompson if I had a rich boyfriend, if I received money from men, if Emily was the daughter of a married man. It wasn't hard to connect the dots." David closed his eyes, feeling a deep shame. "Sarah, I didn't know she did that." "Of course you did. You told her who I was." "I didn't say anything. She found out on her own because she was investigating me too." "Investigating you?" David sighed. "My family doesn't understand why I've changed so much in the last few months. I cancelled commitments, rejected arranged marriage proposals, started questioning the life I've always led. My mum thought someone was influencing me. And there was. I was. For the better, Sarah. You influenced me for the better." Sarah shook her head. "David, that doesn't change anything. We still come from completely different worlds." "What? If I changed worlds?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "What do you mean?" David leaned forward, his eyes intense. "What if I left the company, sold my share, started a new, simpler life? Would you do that?" "I would. For you, for Emily, for us." Sarah studied him for a long moment. There was a sincerity in his eyes that she wanted to believe, but there was also fear. "David, even if you did that, how would I know it wouldn't just be a phase? How would I know that in a few years you wouldn't miss the life you had before?" "Because the life I had before was empty, Sarah, completely empty. These last 2 months have been the most miserable of my life." "Mine too," she admitted softly. David reached across the table, gently touching her hand. "Then let's try again. This time without lies, without omissions, just the 2 of us, building something real." Sarah looked at their intertwined hands, then at the small apartment where they had shared one of the most intimate afternoons they had ever had, him caring for Emily as if she were his own daughter. David, I'm scared. Scared of what? Of believing again, of opening up again, of letting Emily get attached again, and then having to explain why you left. David squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. Not this time. Not ever again. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and hope. And for the first time in 2 months, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be stronger than the differences that separated them. November arrived, bringing with it a subtle but significant change in Sarah's life. David had become a constant presence once again. But this time everything was different. There were no more secrets, no more lies, just the raw reality of 2 worlds trying to meet. The first big test came on a Thursday night. Sarah was working at the diner when her phone rang. It was David, and there was an urgency in his voice that she had never heard before. Sarah, can you talk? Just a minute, I'm at work. She stepped away from the counter, looking for a more private corner. My parents want to meet you. The words fell like a bomb. Sarah tightened her grip on the phone. What do you mean? I told them about us, about you and Emily. I said I plan to ask you to marry me. Sarah felt the world spin. David, we haven't even officially gotten back together yet. I know, but Sarah, I can't live this double life anymore. I either fully commit to you or it doesn't make sense for us to keep trying. The ultimatum wasn't aggressive, but it was real. Sarah understood that David had reached his limit. He needed to know if she was willing to face his world alongside him. When do they want? To meet me? Saturday, dinner at their house. Sarah closed her eyes. Their house probably meant mansion, staff, a world she only saw in movies. David, I don't have clothes for that. I don't know how to behave in that kind of environment. You just be yourself. That's why I love you. But when Saturday came, Sarah felt anything but herself. She had spent the little money she had on a basic black blouse and borrowed a skirt from Carla. Looking at herself in the tiny bathroom mirror, she barely recognized herself. Mom, you look very pretty, Emily said, hugging her. Sarah looked at her daughter, Emily. But why are you so nervous? I'm going to meet David's parents. And is that bad? Sarah knelt down to be at eye level with her daughter. It's not bad, sweetheart, but they are very different from us. Wealthy, important. I'm afraid they won't like me. Emily cupped her mother's face with her little hands. If they don't like you, they're foolish. You're the nicest person in the world. The unwavering confidence of her daughter gave Sarah the courage she needed. David arrived right at 7, driving a car that Sarah recognized as extremely expensive. He was impeccably dressed, dark suit, tie, shoes that probably cost more than her monthly salary. You look beautiful, he said, kissing her forehead. I look ridiculous. You look perfect. The drive to the Upper East Side was silent. Sarah watched the landscape gradually change, from modest buildings to luxury condos, from busy streets to tree-lined avenues. When they stopped in front of an imposing gate, she held David's hand tightly. David, I shouldn't be here. You should. You're part of my life now, the most important part. The house, or rather mansion, was even more impressive inside. Marble everywhere, crystal chandeliers, artworks that Sarah suspected were originals. A uniformed staff member greeted them at the entrance. Good evening, Mr. David. Your parents are in the living room. Robert and Helena Smith were exactly as Sarah had imagined. He was tall and imposing, with perfectly styled grey hair and a suit that cost more than Sarah's rent for a year. She was elegant and cold, with discreet but clearly expensive jewelry, and a gaze that assessed Sarah from head to toe in seconds. "Mom, Dad, this is Sarah Johnson." Sarah extended her hand, trying not to let her nervousness show. "Nice to meet you." "The pleasure is ours," Robert said politely. But Sarah caught the reservation in his voice. Helena was even more direct. "So you are the famous Sarah? David talks a lot about you." There was something in her tone that made it clear that what David said was not necessarily positive in Helena's opinion. Dinner was served in a dining room larger than Sarah's entire apartment. 3 different courses, each served by discreet staff. Sarah tried to remember which fork to use for which dish, which glass for which drink. How to behave in an environment where every gesture seemed to have a specific protocol. "Sarah, David told us you study business," Robert said, delicately cutting a piece of salmon. "I did. I had to take a break due to financial issues." "Oh." Helena exchanged a meaningful look with her husband. "And what do you do now?" "I clean at a clinic in the morning and work as a waitress at a diner in the afternoon." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah saw David shift uncomfortably in his chair. "And your daughter?" Helena continued. "David mentioned you have a daughter." "Emily, 8 years old. She's an amazing girl. And her father?" "Mom." David tried to interrupt. "He's not present," Sarah replied directly. "I've been a single mother for 8 years." "I see." The judgment in Helena's voice was clear. The rest of dinner proceeded with palpable tension. Robert and Helena asked polite but pointed questions, clearly testing Sarah, looking for flaws, inconsistencies, signs of financial interest. It was when Helena mentioned the company's expansion plans to Europe that Sarah finally understood the true extent of the Smith family's fortune. They weren't just wealthy, they were incredibly powerful, owners of a business empire she couldn't even imagine. "David, dear," Helena said when coffee was served, "did you forget to tell Sarah about the invitation from the French ambassador, the dinner at the embassy next week?" David tensed. "I'm still deciding if I'm going." "Of course you are. It's an important networking opportunity, and I'm sure Sarah would understand that." Helena looked directly at Sarah, that certain social obligations are part of business life. The message was clear. Sarah wouldn't fit into that kind of event. "Actually," Sarah said calmly, "I think David should go. His professional responsibilities are important." Helena seemed surprised by the response. She probably expected jealousy or insecurity. When they finally left the mansion, David was visibly shaken. In the car, he immediately began to apologize. "Sarah, I'm sorry. They were horrible to you. They were what I expected them to be. They shouldn't have treated you like that." Sarah looked out the window, watching the city go by. "David, can I ask you an honest question?" "Of course. Do you really think this can work? Us?" David stopped the car on a tree-lined avenue and turned to her. "Why are you asking that?" "Because tonight I saw your world for real, and it's not just about money, David. It's about a completely different lifestyle, social protocols, obligations, expectations. Your mother was right. I don't know how to behave at an embassy. I don't know which fork to use at a formal dinner. I don't understand anything about art, wine, international travel." And so you were born into this world. It's natural for you. But for me, it would be like constantly playing a role. David held her hands. "Sarah, that world you saw today is not who I am. It's who they forced me to be. With you, I've discovered who I really want to be." "But it's who you are, David. Your parents, your company, your responsibilities. You can't just ignore all of that." "I can. I can sell my share of the company, leave this world." "And then what happens? What do you become? A regular man?" working at a regular company, earning a regular salary? Sarah shook her head. David, you have no idea what it's like to wake up every day worried about whether you'll have money for lunch. You don't know what it's like to choose between buying medicine for your daughter or paying the electricity bill. It's not your world. It could be. Could it? Or do you think it could because you've never truly lived? Sarah took a deep breath. David, I love you, more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. But love isn't enough, not when the differences are so great. Sarah, let me finish. She turned to face him completely. If we were together, one of two things would happen. Either you would give up everything for me and one day resent that choice, or I would try to fit into your world and completely lose who I am. In both cases, we would lose. David felt as if he were losing the most important thing in his life for the second time. So there's no way? Is that what you're saying? Sarah closed her eyes, tears finally falling. I'm saying that maybe some differences are too great, even when love is real. The silence in the car was absolute. Two hearts breaking at the same time. Two people who loved each other deeply, but couldn't find a way to be together. Take me home, Sarah finally whispered. David drove in silence through the streets of São Paulo, both knowing that when they reached the east side, they were saying goodbye for the second time. And this time, it might be for good. December arrived, wrapping São Paulo in a festive atmosphere that painfully contrasted with the emptiness in Sarah's heart. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner at the Smith's house, and she forced herself to believe she had made the right decision. But the pain didn't lessen. Emily, with the keen perception of children, noticed everything. "Mom, you're sad again," she observed one Saturday morning while they had breakfast at the small kitchen table. "I'm just tired, sweetheart." "Is it because of Uncle David?" Sarah stopped stirring her coffee. How could she explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes love isn't enough? That sometimes people love each other but can't be together? "Emily, you like David a lot, right?" "I do. He's nice to me. He's nice to you. He helps me with my homework." Emily counted on her fingers. "And he makes you laugh for real, not that fake laugh when you're worried." Her daughter's words touched a painful spot in Sarah's heart. It was true. With David, she laughed genuinely, dreamed genuinely, felt complete in a way she hadn't experienced in years. But sometimes, sweetheart, even when we really like someone, things just don't work out. Why? Sarah searched for the right words. Because his world is very different from ours. Emily was thoughtful for a moment. "Mum, remember when we moved here and I didn't want to because it was different from the old apartment?" "I remember." "But you said that different isn't bad, it's just different. And now I like it here." The child's simple wisdom made Sarah feel a tightness in her chest. "It's different, Emily. Adult things are more complicated." "Are they? Or do adults complicate things?" That afternoon, while Emily played in the neighborhood park, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was Patricia, David's secretary. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Johnson. Mr. David asked me to call." Sarah felt her heart race. Is something wrong? He resigned." "What do you mean?" "Yesterday afternoon he went into Mr. Roberts' office and handed in a resignation letter. He said he was selling his share of the company and leaving." Sarah sat on a bench in the park, her legs weak. "He can't have done that." "He did, Ma'am. And since then he's been in the office packing his things. He won't talk to anyone, won't answer the phone. I think you should talk to him." After hanging up, Sarah watched Emily play on the slide, trying to process the information. David had really given up everything, for her. And now she felt responsible for a decision that could ruin his life. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Sarah made a decision. She took the subway to Midtown, arriving at the Smith Tech Solutions building at 9 o'clock. The security guard initially didn't want to let her up, but when she mentioned David's name, he called to confirm. "You can go up, 40th floor." The elevator had never seemed so slow. When the doors opened, Sarah saw David alone in a huge room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. He looked up when he heard her enter, and she could see that he was as shaken as she was. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "Your secretary called me." "David, tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't do the crazy thing I'm thinking." David stood up, running his hands through, his hair in a deep expression of exhaustion. "I handed in my resignation letter yesterday." "Why?" "Because you were right." Sarah looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" David stepped closer to her, and Sarah could see that he had lost weight, that there were deep circles under his eyes. "You said I didn't know what it was like to live in the real world, that I didn't understand what it meant to worry about money, make hard choices, give up dreams." He stopped in front of her. "You were right. I didn't know. But I want to learn." "David, I sold my share of the company to my cousin. I bought a small apartment in Brooklyn, 2 bedrooms, nothing luxurious. I got a job at a medium consulting firm. I'm going to earn $6,000 a month." Sarah's eyes widened. "You did what?" "I chose you, Sarah. I chose us. I chose a real life instead of an empty one." "David, you've completely lost it. $6,000 is a lot of money for me, but for you, it's nothing. You're used to a different standard of living. I'm willing to get used to a new standard." Sarah started pacing the room, desperate. "And what if it doesn't work out? What if in 6 months you realize you can't live like this? What if you start blaming me for giving up everything?" David held her shoulders, making her stop. "Sarah, you don't understand. My previous life was a prison. Yes, a gilded, comfortable prison, but still a prison. With you, I discovered what freedom is." "David, let me finish. These last years, I lived on autopilot. I worked because it was expected, attended events because it was mandatory, dated women because they were suitable. I never stopped to ask what I really wanted." He gently touched her face. "Until I met you. But your family, my family will have to accept it. They either accept me with you, or they don't accept me at all." Sarah felt the tears start to fall. "What if I'm not enough? What if after a while you realize you've sacrificed too much?" David smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in weeks. "Sarah, you are not a sacrifice. You are a reward. A second chance to truly live." "But—" "No buts!" David knelt in front of her, pulling out a small box from his pocket. "Sarah Johnson, will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the box, then at David, then back at the box. "David, get up. You can't—" "It's not an expensive ring. I bought it at a downtown jewelry store. $800, about what I earn in 3 days now." He opened the box, revealing a simple, beautiful ring, but not extravagant. "It's a ring for a real life. Our real life." Sarah looked at the ring, then at David kneeling on the floor of the office that had been his kingdom. There was something symbolically powerful in that image, the richest man she knew, kneeling in an empty room, offering her not his fortune, but his life. "David, are you sure? Absolutely?" "I've never been so sure of anything in my life." "What if your family never accepts? What if we lose contact with them forever? Then we build our own family, you, me, Emily, and whoever else God gives us." Sarah felt her heart open completely for the first time in months. She looked at David, really looked. She saw a man who had given up everything for love, not just for love of her, but for love of the life they could build together. Yes, she whispered. David's eyes widened. Yes? Yes, David. I accept your proposal. David jumped up, picking her up and spinning her around the empty room. When he set her down, they kissed with all the passion and relief of 2 months of separation, two hearts finally admitting they were stronger together. Wait, Sarah suddenly said, pulling away slightly. There's one condition. David laughed. What? Emily has to approve. I think I can convince her. 2 hours later, they were at Sarah's apartment, waking, Emily to share the news. The girl, sleepy but immediately alert when she saw David, listened to the explanation seriously. So, Uncle David is going to be my dad now? If you want, David said, kneeling to her height. It would be an honor to be your dad, Emily. Emily looked at him for a long moment, then threw herself into his arms. I want to. I've always wanted a dad. Sarah watched David embrace her daughter, both crying with emotion, and knew she had made the right decision. It wouldn't be easy. They would have to navigate social differences, face David's family, build a new life from scratch, but they would do it together. The next morning, when they woke up in the small apartment, David had slept on the sofa. They found Emily in the kitchen making breakfast coffee for the three of them. This is how families do it, right? She asked, serving slightly burnt toast, but made with love. David and Sarah looked at each other over the small table, both knowing that this 8-year-old had perfectly summed up what was truly important in life. That's exactly right, sweetheart, Sarah replied, taking David's hand across the table. That's exactly how it is. And for the first time in a long time, the three felt complete. Not because they had money or status or anything material, but because they had something infinitely more valuable, a family built on true love, the daily choice to be together, the certainty that no matter what challenges came, they would face everything side by side. 6 months later, David and Sarah got married in a simple ceremony on Malibu Beach, with only their closest friends and Emily as the flower girl. Robert and Helena Smith did not attend, but David had made peace with that decision. Some families you are born into, others you choose, and he had chosen his.